Hi, Mark. This is Sadie from Continuing the Conversation with Sadie. In today's podcast, the episode is a gentle but powerful one, and we'll be talking about something that sits at the core of care work: leadership and personal sustainability. How we balance empathy and boundaries. My guest is someone whose voice has become a steady presence in the social care landscape. Mark Tops is a national digital lead, a passionate advocate and co-founder of The Caring View, a platform that's reshaped how we talk about care, leadership and lived experience. But beyond the titles, Mark is someone who's made a conscious shift towards a calmer, more intentional way of living and leading. In this conversation, we explore what that shift has looked like for him, how he holds space for others while protecting his own energy, and why boundaries, far from being barriers, can actually deepen our empathy and strengthen our impact. So whether you're a care leader, a frontline worker like myself, or someone navigating your own boundaries in a helping role, this one's for you. Let's begin. Mark, I just want to ask you, what values or experiences shaped your early approach to care and leadership?
Yes. Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me. I think when I reflect back, I joined working in social care when I was 17. And I remember most of the staff didn't want to go out with the residents that we were supporting. It was learning disabilities and mental health. And I always found it really strange that why would you not want to go to the cinemas with somebody, or why would you not want to go, swimming or support them at college? And I just found it really bizarre. And I think that inspired me that one day I wanted to run a service that was there for the right reasons. It was clear that those staff, or the majority of those staff, didn't want to be there. I got into management when I was 21. And I
Wow.
think sat here now, reflecting back, I had no experience of what a manager was. I'd probably only had a couple in my lifetime. I was in a senior role before the management role for a very limited amount of time. And I
Yeah.
just went by my gut and did what I think was the right thing. I think I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to lead a service that was doing the right thing for the people that we supported. I'd had
Yeah.
some experiences of poor management to me,
Mm.
and I remember what that felt like for me. And I think I was always just led by the staff, by the people we were supporting and their families. But if I'm completely honest, I had no clue back then of like legislation and
Mm.
inspectorate frameworks or anything, which is worrying. But yeah, I kind of just led with what I thought was right with my heart, really.
Yeah. But also it is a person-led profession, so that makes a lot of sense. And it's a vocation, it's a way of life, isn't it? It's not some things you learn you just can't learn in college or university. So on a lot of levels, I think a lot of us will be able to relate to what you've just said. How has reflective practice helped you evolve your leadership style over time?
I think if I'm being honest, up until a few years ago, I probably didn't reflect. I think I didn't have
Yeah,
kind of
it's a
anyone
hard thing to
delivering.
do.
Yeah, and I don't think I was aware of it. I don't think I ever went on any kind of leadership or management training. So it
Yeah,
wasn't anything that I was at the forefront of thinking of. I think
yeah,
I always knew that I wanted to deliver this amazing service with amazing outcomes and have a staff team that genuinely wanted to care. And I think that's what
mm,
drove me.
yeah,
I think probably a couple of years ago was really, well, probably the pandemic is when I've really started reflecting back. I
yeah,
mean, obviously, I've reflected back throughout my whole career in terms of why do I want to be a manager? When it's been tough in terms of, back when I was 21, I know I had staff that were like, well, you're too young to be a manager. And it was always kind of reflecting back to those days of when I was 17, 18 of, actually, I know why I want to be a manager and why I want to deliver great outcomes and have staff that are passionate.
yeah,
And I think some of those conversations, the difficult conversations with staff, the ones that thought I was too young or were being combative, actually remembering why I wanted to do it actually made some of those conversations easier because it made it real in my head. Actually,
yeah,
you don't want to be here and support the vision and the journey, and I want staff that want to be here and
yeah.
join me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also I think you've just highlighted something which is important to mention, that reflective practice is actually a skill and it's something you develop over time, because the more experience you get in your role, the more you're able to sort of process that information and use it to become better at what you're practicing. So I think that really highlights that, and that's good. Can you share a moment when reflection helped you course correct or deepen your empathy?
Yeah, I think the first time I really truly reflected was probably the pandemic. I've always been
Yeah,
a workaholic. I've worked a ridiculous amount of hours, even from when I joined care, even when I was in management. And I think I
it's
was
a
managing
hard
a care
job.
home. Yeah, it really
Mm,
is. And I think you
it's
spoke
a
earlier
very
about
hard
that
job.
it's emotional, and when
Mm,
somebody's gone off sick and you're already there, or you know that there's going to be a gap in that rota, I always was the first to say, "Do you know what, I'll cover it. I don't mind."
yeah,
And a lot of
I
the
can believe
time,
that.
I never found, especially working with a lot of my experience has been with learning disabilities. I never found it like a job. You know, going to the cinema and being paid to go to the cinema, going swimming, okay, it was challenging at times, but it was never like an actual job. It was always like doing something that I would be doing with my friends, with my brothers. Like it was never anything like I didn't see it as like work per se. I think the pandemic, it was the same. I was managing a care home and I had ended up moving into the service. My wife was on the shielding list, and I didn't have any kind of second doubts about jumping feet in and saying, "Look, I can commit to staying in the service, looking after the people, the staff." And it also made life at home slightly easier in terms of not having to worry about bringing COVID back home to my wife. But I remember about to being gowned up, supporting somebody that,
Yeah,
and at the time I had an Apple Watch, and I'll talk about that later on about kind of devices and bits and pieces. But and I just saw a picture of my daughter in February in the snow with my brother-in-law because my
oh,
wife had moved in with my brother-in-law and her parents to make a bubble. Um,
yeah.
Seems so strange when you use the terminology
God,
now,
yeah. When you
but I
said that, I
remember,
thought, my God.
yeah, it's like a blast from the past. But
How long
I
ago
remember
was it
seeing that
now? I've lost track.
2019. Yeah, it's like
Oh
five,
my
6 years ago.
God.
It's absolutely
It's,
insane,
it
but
seems like yesterday.
it
Really
does in
does.
so many ways. But I think I saw that picture of my daughter with my brother-in-law, and I remember thinking to myself, that should be me. And I don't know what happened in my mind or in my brain, but it was just that moment was like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? Like, why am I here when I should be at home with my kids and my wife and making sure that
Yeah.
they're the ones that are supported and feeling
Yeah.
held, as opposed to me doing that for staff and the people I'm supporting. And I found it really challenging. And I just was very open with the directors of the company at the time. We still didn't have the end of the pandemic back then. So we were just in the second lockdown. And I just felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel at that point. And I just said, look, I don't have a job to go to. I don't mind if I'm here for another year. I just need to, for me, I need to know there's a light at the end of the tunnel so I
Yeah.
can
Yeah. I
do
understand
what I
that.
need to do.
Yeah. It was
And I
never
ended up
ending, wasn't it?
leaving. It really was. And I left that role without a role to go to. And
That's hard.
it is, but also I felt like even if I didn't have something, I mean, luckily I found something in between that notice period, but I did feel at the time, you know what, actually, the time you don't get time back. Like you can make money in other ways. And I think so many people are making income
Yeah.
from social media and bits and pieces. And I kind of wasn't worried, but I think that was the first time that I ever really thought and reflected back.
It gave you that course correct, which
Yeah,
is what you're
100%.
saying. Yeah. So you got more quality time with the family.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. No, I mean, you look at the world now, if you take yourself out of care, everything's changed since COVID, hasn't it? I mean, the way we work, the way we live, the way, so reflective practices important for everybody. What role does reflection play in helping you balance empathy with boundaries, especially in a high pressured environment, so like your management role, things like that? I mean, working in a care home during COVID was definitely high pressure.
Yeah, it was. And I think there were sides of the staff team that you'd never experienced before, sides of the people that you were supporting that you'd never seen before. Obviously, you had the dynamics of obviously families couldn't visit. And it was very challenging. And I think if we stay on that subject of reflecting kind of on that pandemic era,
Mm,
I think that really, even now, I reflect back on that time, and I struggle with it greatly in terms of the time that I was without the children and my wife. But I
yeah,
also think it really, like now when I'm overworking myself and I think back to what am I doing? The pandemic is the first one that comes back to me around
yeah.
work-life
It was
balance,
haunting, wasn't it?
actually.
It
Yeah. And
really was. I mean,
it kind of centers myself in terms of it's okay to switch off. It's okay to, you don't need to work a million hours. Actually,
yeah,
no. And I think there has been kind of ups and downs in my career, kind of post pandemic, in terms of feeling like a number in some organizations.
yeah,
And I think those
absolutely.
experiences And I kind of tie them in with the pandemic because I think I would never have left if it wasn't for COVID-19. But those kind of bumps in the journey kind of just
Yeah.
cement even more when I reflect back around actually, you are a number, your health
Yeah.
comes first, family comes first. You know, you can't work every hour under the sun and it's okay to say no.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think what you just said there is very important actually, and something that must go through the minds of a lot of people who work through COVID or even lived through COVID at whatever level you work in care. It had a profound effect on everybody. But yeah, that's important. So moving on from reflection, we're going to go on to emotional intelligence in action. This is something that anybody who listens to my podcast, or who is part of my business, knows I'm quite big on emotional intelligence because I think it is the invisible string that holds the industry together. How do we navigate the system? How do we navigate challenges and the emotional toll it takes on everybody? And so this is why it's a section within the questions, because I feel it's really, really important, especially when it comes to boundary setting. So in this section, I wanted to start with, how does emotional intelligence show up in your day-to-day leadership, especially when navigating complex care conversations?
Yeah, so I think for me, I still lead with those core values of putting people first. It's still there, rooted
Yeah,
deep within me. And I don't think that
exactly.
will ever leave me. It kind of is what drove me to get into management. And I think respect for the people doing those operational frontline roles. I think even the registered manager role, you know, I've been a carer, I've been a senior carer, I've been a registered manager, and I know how hard all of those roles are within their own rights. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when I'm speaking to my staff team, and it might be that one particular, and it might be a care worker, for example, might be stressed and feeling overloaded, I can relate to that. I think I have to be very careful about taking on their emotions as my own emotions.
That's right.
And I
Yeah.
and I do that sometimes, especially if they're passionate about something that they want to change, and I equally feel as passionate. I then feel like it's my project to kind of railroad through somehow. But yeah, I think self-awareness is really key in
Yeah.
terms of, you know,
Yeah. That's another
your own
key word. Yeah.
boundaries, but also honesty and just transparency. And if you've had experiences of going through something similar, or you know somebody that has, of just being open and honest and listening, I think listening and communication are key. And I think they're two things that quite often get missed so easily.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. I think, yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there, really, is that you can't, because you're an empath, which a lot of us are, because we're in the care industry, you have to be really careful that you take time out for yourself, because otherwise you're just taking on other people's emotions and then you end up with headaches, bad backs, it transpires into other things. And it's really hard to do that. And that takes time. It takes understanding of yourself as well as other people, getting to know your team, and it takes experience to be able to get the skills to do that. And it's almost like you have to learn to sort of, I suppose, disassociate yourself away from their feelings and recognize yours first to be able to do that. So I can see that obviously you've had some really big experiences that have helped you get there. So that's really good, and it helps you go home and be a dad and be you for your family and not bring work home as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think I always found that I've always had jobs where I've got like a 45-minute, an hour commute to and from work. And I do find that drive home really allows you to kind of process things,
Yeah,
but also turn up at that front door of your house, having thought about everything, having processed everything, and being able to switch off a lot easier than if you work like 5 minutes. And
yeah,
obviously, there's days when I work from home, and I do find that switching off when you're working from home so much harder than when you've got a drive in between.
yes, yeah, exactly. How do you stay attuned to others' emotions without losing sight of your own boundaries or well-being? I'm just bringing that in because it ties in with what we're talking about.
I think probably what we were just talking about in terms of I can't absorb everything. I'm quite lucky that in my role, I've got a number of managers that sit underneath me. So even if I'm in the office and I can hear and I can see it, or I can just get a sense of something's going on,
Mm,
actually, that's not my role to take all of that on. Actually, that's some of those managers' responsibilities. I think I am very passionate about obviously social care, and it's so easy for me to get involved. And I think I do have to take that step back so I don't. But I think what we were talking about earlier is just that honesty. I think if you've seen something, if you have heard something, whilst it might not be my responsibility, if I know that something's not being done about it that should be done, it's still
Yeah,
then having that conversation where that conversation needs to be had.
absolutely. What advice would you give to other care leaders who want to lead with emotional intelligence but fear being too vulnerable or too open?
I hear this all the time, and I don't know. I feel like we're near the end of 2025, or soon be in 2026, and I just think, be honest, be real. I think
Yeah,
social media in the last kind of year has really changed in terms of you've got people that are talking about their medical conditions, health conditions, what it's like to be, working as a care worker, what it's like to be a manager. And I think they're all honest, they're all raw. And I think actually you can be honest with your team. I don't think we're not the managers of like the 70s or the 80s where it was very
yeah,
hierarchical. And I absolutely hate the
that's right.
hierarchical. Actually,
We talk a lot
we're
more.
leaders now.
Mm,
The rigid walls of management have kind of been broken down, and I think you can be honest with your team, and I think that helps with them understanding the challenges that you've got, what that role actually entails, because I think sometimes people aren't aware of kind of individual's roles and responsibilities,
yeah,
and I think it helps people bring people on that journey with you.
yeah,
So I'd say to anybody that, just be honest, embrace it. You don't need to kind of fear it. There's no worry in, admitting your strengths and your weaknesses.
yeah, absolutely. And also it builds trust, which is essential for any relationship.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, can you share a moment when emotional intelligence helped you diffuse tension or build trust across the sector?
I think for me, obviously locally every day, well, not every day, but locally, obviously I'm doing it in terms of utilizing my experiences of some of those roles and some of the challenges that I faced in those roles and being able to empathize with people doing them now. I think in terms of the wider sector, I think it's having those honest conversations, so utilizing my social media to talk very openly about kind of the challenges that I'm going through, whether that's personal, whether that's work related.
Yeah,
In the blogs that I'm writing, they're always very geared towards kind of registered managers. So actually trying to write about the things that those soft skills that I think like we spoke about earlier, that you're not
yeah,
necessarily trained in, but that I'm more aware of now, trying to talk and make them more publicly known.
yeah,
And I think just using your voice for good. And I think there is something in, you don't have to be posting every day, but just showing up and spreading positivity about the sector, but also
yeah,
the challenges of the sector, about your role, about just anything that you really want to talk about. And I think that you don't necessarily always see the impact of that. Sometimes you hear it from somebody that says, oh, actually, I really resonated with that. It's
yeah.
made me think about XYZ. Sometimes you'll
Mm,
never see the impact of it, but you might have touched 1, 2, 10, 20 people with that
yeah,
post.
that's true. Yes. Okay. No, that's good because again, it goes back to building trust, doesn't it? The connecting the dots and networking. With building resilience through reflection, again, I think this is a big one as well, especially going back to everything everybody's been through throughout COVID and their experiences in care. Resilience is something that I think is not just a skill, it's essential. I just wanted to know when you think about resilience in your leadership, what does it actually look and feel like day to day?
Subconsciously, I must think about it. We all must think about it day to day and our own resilience. And I think for me, it's about what do I want to achieve? What's important to me? Of course, work's important to me, but I think I've got more of a focus now on my family and some of the things outside that I never prioritized. I think knowing my limitations, and I think in my current role, it's the first company I've worked in that's a large organization, so it's got so much back office support. It's actually there's people with more experience and skills than I have to actually
Right.
raise
Yeah.
the idea, let them do the work. You can be involved, but let them utilize their experiences and
Yeah.
their skill
You
set.
can lean
You
on
don't
them.
have to do everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
And you can delegate.
Whereas I think for a small organization, and I think, you don't have that, especially if you're the registered manager, you're doing absolutely everything because you don't have that back office support.
Yeah. And that's what I'm doing.
And all I would say is, on reflection, just thinking about now is even if you are working in a small team, actually that some of your team will have skills and experiences that you don't have, so lean on
Yeah.
your team and be honest with them if you don't have that. And I think it's breaking down that barrier. I think definitely when you kind of get, I'm in a regional role now, I think there's that expectation that you have, absolute sound experience of managing finances and budgets and different bits and finances and budgets are not my strength, but actually I've got people in my team. I mean, I've got a finance team, and if I didn't have them, I've got people in my team that have worked in accounts, that have worked, in banks.
Yeah.
So you can
They
draw on their skills and experiences. And I think, like you said earlier, it builds trust, but also it builds that rounded team where people feel involved as well.
Yeah, definitely. Can you share a time when reflection helped you recover from a setback or reframe a difficult experience? Obviously, you can't reveal names and that, but just paint a picture for us.
Yeah, I think I'll use the pandemic because we've already spoken about, and I think it's one that I still grapple with. I think
Yeah,
there's quite often I look back and I think, would I do it again? I dived straight in without kind of
yeah,
considering what my kids thought about me not being there, what my wife thought. And I probably would do it again. I was really proud of the team. And I think, we've
yeah,
spoken about how you saw different sides. I was really proud with, the people we were supporting, living with
yeah,
challenging behaviour and mental health and how they coped. I was obviously challenging local authorities and local government and the government around some of the legislation that we didn't have and that impacted people living with a learning disability. I think there's a lot of things that I learned during the pandemic in terms of, lobbying, utilising your voice, setting up, campaigns and petitions. I think I learned a lot about myself in terms of resilience.
yeah,
But yeah, I think I
absolutely.
utilise that all the time. And I think even now, if I'm going through something tough, I think back to actually nothing's as tough as that blinking pandemic. Like, we all survived that. It was the
Yeah,
fear of the unknown.
yeah.
Nobody knew what they were doing. It changed every other week. And if you can get
Even the
through that, you
government.
can, yeah, 100%, 100%. And
So how are
their
we supposed to
legislation,
know?
yeah. And I think if you've gone through that, you can actually get through near enough anything. And I think social care and time just moves so quickly, doesn't it, in general?
Yeah,
That I think sometimes that feels like it was like 25 years ago, even though it wasn't. In some ways, it feels like it was yesterday. But I think just kind of thinking about something that, and it is something that's more, of a challenge than it was anything else. I think
yeah,
sometimes focusing on the challenges are actually better than focusing on something that was positive in your life, because that's how
yeah.
we learn from those challenges and those obstacles.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. What practices help you stay emotionally resourced, especially when the sector feels heavy or change feels slow?
I
And that's
think,
quite hard when the pace gets slower, definitely.
yeah, 100%. I think in my role, it never seems to be slow. I think it's the sector as a whole never feels slow. But I think for me, it's just remembering why you're doing the job you're doing, regardless of a role. Why did you come into that organization, or why did you come into that role? What did you want to do? Are you still doing that? I think for me, it's about staying up to date with kind of local trends within the sector in general,
Yeah.
looking at what other people are doing around management. Yeah, and just I think ultimately is just trying your best. It's fine. You might fail at some things, but trying your best.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And actually that you say trying your best like it's easy, but a lot of people take years to reach that point of acceptance with themselves. So again, that's going back to self-awareness, resilience, all important things to help you do your job. How do you know when it's time to pause, reflect, or reset? And how do you give yourself permission to do that?
I talk about work-life balance all the time, but I'm actually really terrible at it. But I think for me is after I came out of that managing that care home after the pandemic, there were some things for me that were really like non-negotiables. So parents' evening, school plays.
Yeah.
My
The big
youngest is
moments you don't want to
yeah,
miss. Yeah.
absolutely.
That stay with you.
My youngest is really passionate about football, so doing those
Oh,
football club
yeah.
I absolutely hate football, but doing those club runs for her, you know,
Absolutely. Being
making
the parent.
time, absolutely putting down that phone, putting down the devices when they're playing with me, being present in the moment. For my wife, it's about actually making time to go and do the things that we did before we had kids, around going to the theatre, going to concert, to the cinema, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
And I think I've just come back off of holiday, and I think it was the very first time ever that I said to myself, no phone, no watch, like
Yeah.
smartwatch, nothing. I gave myself 2 days of the 2 weeks I was away to check email. So I did one day, well, I say a day, it was like an hour on two occasions.
Which is a
Um, yeah,
big
which is
jump for
massive
you.
for me. Yeah, absolutely. I said absolutely no teams while I was away.
Yeah.
I was very honest with the
Good.
team. I was like, I need that break for myself. I know I need a break. They've got my wife's details. I was like, if there's an emergency, ring her. I was like, but I won't be. And do you know what I found is that, and I did a post on social media, is that I've worn an Apple Watch religiously for
Mm.
God knows how many years, and I took it off, and I normally wear it all the time.
Yeah. You
I wear
said
it
you were
for
going
like
to talk about
swimming.
the Apple Watch.
Yeah, I just realized
I'm not
actually not
sponsored by
wearing
them.
it, no, how much it pings on your wrist or it vibrates and it distracts you. And actually, it was really nice not having that. And I think because I didn't take my phone with me when we were out, I left it in the hotel room. And I've got rid of it. I've gone back to, I've got this old school Casio retro with a calculator watch now, which I absolutely love. But yeah, I think every day there's something that you can take from, and I probably would never go back to a smartwatch now unless I'd configured it to not notify me on everything. But I think sometimes actually it's okay to go back to those basics.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I've just got to throw something in here because I know when I've been out with friends and we've had a chat about technology and technology with the kids, it's the same sort of thing about just getting it away from us for however long, just have a break from it. I always find it funny that when we talk about what happens when we go back to that piece, that device, is there loads of messages? Did we miss anything? And every single one of us have said, actually, a lot of it, if all of it was not important. And it's like, it's that constant distraction that, it's like when you wait for a text message to come through, you think it's sort of flashing to say something's coming through and you're waiting in an anticipation for that message. And you think, how much of our time do we waste on things that don't matter? And that's the sort of thing that ends up going through all of our heads when we have a break from technology. And you just, when you're on it, you think you've got to be on it all the time because you're waiting for something to come through that's really important. And you realize when you put it down that it's not there. And you could put it down for a week and one thing that's really important comes through. Really makes you think. Do you find that when you put it down for an hour that there was hardly anything on there for you to worry about in hindsight?
No, absolutely. I think I came back after, other than the ridiculous amount of emails for work. I had my family with me. That's what matters, isn't it? Is your
Yeah,
family and your
yeah.
friends. And I
Just
think,
makes you put
yeah,
things in
I
perspective,
had
doesn't it?
my kids with me, I had my wife with me. They're the things that matter most in my life. Actually, making those core memories. I mean, I do look back and I think, God, I didn't have my phone, so I have no photo. I mean, my wife had her phone, so there are some photos, but nowhere near as many as I would have taken. But actually, I've got the memories kind of in my brain as opposed to on a
Yeah.
device. And I think if we're honest, I don't ever print out the photos that are on my
Yeah.
phone. So I'd
Just
much rather have them
builds
and
up.
be there and present. Yeah. And I think for my kids, I like to think it's probably the first holiday where I've not been, juggling emails and calls
Yeah.
and trying to be present. And yeah, so hopefully for them, it was a completely different experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Innovating with integrity as you do very clearly, and you do very well. I was going to ask, innovation can be energizing, but also overwhelming. How do you stay emotionally anchored while leading change?
I think it is knowing your limitations. It's knowing what you can and you can't do. I think
Yeah,
for me now that I've learned actually it's okay to go away for 2 weeks and
yeah,
not have a device, I will do that again. I think it's sharing that as well, because I think even just a conversation like you and I are having, actually there'll be so many people that are listening that also probably think, oh, actually I take my phone all the time. Actually, is it okay to
mm.
leave it?
Have a
And I
mini break, a little break.
absolutely,
Build
and
it up slowly.
I know there's companies out there now that you can go and they have like cabins in the woods, but you can't take a phone, or there is just
Yeah,
no signal in that, so it forces you. And I think sometimes that's a massive jump, but I think there are small changes that you can make. I think it's knowing, I spoke earlier about all those things that I'm now non-negotiables for me, is actually if something comes up in my diary, actually, A, why have you blocked it over the top of something I've already got in my diary? But actually, B, saying,
mm.
actually, I can't do that date. You're going to have to
Yeah.
rearrange that meeting.
And also asking yourself, I suppose, will the sky fall in if I don't do it? And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't. So
Yeah.
I suppose that's a good thing, isn't it? Because it frees up your time.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, just switching off in general. If I'm working from home, so easy to carry that laptop from whichever room I'm working in to the next room, into the lounge, and actually shutting it down. And one thing, I don't personally do this, but one thing that somebody I know that does, and I think it's a brilliant idea, is to unplug the charger off your laptop. If you are a workaholic, is work until that battery dies, and then you switch off, which I think is a great tip for anybody that wants to kind of transition into that. But it's something you've got control of, but you don't necessarily have ultimate control because you're dependent on that battery. But
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. I like that one. With the caring view and your wider advocacy, how do you ensure contributors feel safe, seen, and protected?
I think for me, it's straight from the outset, we say there are no boundaries, so you can say whatever you want. So it's always honest thoughts, which I always think are much better. It's always that
Mm.
raw person's emotions, whether that's behind a screen or whether that's in person on an event that we're kind of leading. I think more so probably for the in-person events is calling people out if there is something that, and one example that I can think of is I love a notebook, and if I'm publicly speaking now, I will use notes. My memory isn't as good as it used to be, but I do remember, and I have been on panels where there'll be people in the audience and you can hear them talking about, oh, why have they got a notebook? But calling that out, especially if it's a guest of yours that then might absorb that as a negative, actually, well, I've got a notebook and she's got a notebook. Like, not all of us can remember everything. And almost saying to people, actually, you get up here and talk in front of 100 people and see how much you remember with a mind block. But I think for me it's I think
Mind
for me
block.
it's which absolutely you do, because you just look out on that audience, or even if you sat behind a screen, sometimes it just disappears out your head, and actually just having those notes on a bit of paper really help you kind of refocus.
I've
But
got absolutely no problem with any
yeah,
of that. I think people do what they need to do to get through, and
yeah.
that's it. That's their business. Crack on.
But I think as a wider society, actually, why is it okay now to call people out like that? Like 10,
Mm.
15 years ago, you would never have called somebody out so publicly. And I know that we're now all sat behind screens. It's very easy to write what you think or write something hateful. But actually, why are we now taking that into society in person? Like, how have we become like this to one another? It's really
Yeah.
baffling. But yeah, I think going back to kind of your question, I think for me, it's listening to what they've got to say, respecting what they have to say, especially even if it's a difference of opinion, and learning from that different opinion.
But I think at the core of it, going back to foundations, it's about understanding we're all human. We're different, but we're all the same. We have responsibilities. We all feel pressures of life. And that you have to remember that, because no matter
Absolutely.
what, somebody somewhere is going through something. So it's going back to what you said in the earlier section about just accepting that you're doing your best. And that can take a lot, especially when you've been through a lot. Looking ahead, what kind of innovation excites you, and how will you protect your energy as you lead into it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big one around devices and kind of what's coming is obviously AI and kind of robotics. And I think they're going to really reshape how we all work and how we all operate day to
Yeah,
day. And I think, we're seeing it already with, cars and what cars can already do.
yeah. Now, cars is an interesting one, isn't it? Because
Oh,
if you think
absolutely.
of the elderly generation who can't, you know, if you've got dementia, you're not advised to drive. What's going to happen there? Are they going to have cars that turn up at the house who drive them? That's a big one, because that reduces loneliness and isolation. That's not a bad thing. But then, does that mean that only people with money are going to be able to do that? Does that restrict the less wealthy? So then that affects social mobility. You've got, I mean, what devices do you find will be helpful? Do you think robots will take over?
I think you touch on a really good point around price and whether people will be able to, afford it or not, and what does that look like. I don't think robots will take over, but I do think they will play a massive part in what we do. I mean, love him or hate him, Elon Musk has some great ideas and tech that is coming out. I mean, I'm fascinated by a Tesla robot, and if they're within my price range, I will 100% get one. But yeah, I don't think phones.
Sponsored
Yeah,
by Tesla now.
well,
Thanks, Mark.
I think
Get a few lawsuits my
we
way.
saw VR, didn't we, headsets, and they didn't really take off. But I do think that a mobile phone won't be what a mobile phone is now. I think as kind of AI gets a lot better, and we're already hearing Amazon and Google talking about their, Alexa devices or whichever device you've got in your home and how different they're going to look. My friend's got a BMW, and I know he's already got Siri, and you can tell it to phone a restaurant through the car and book it using AI. And I kind of think even something like that, how, in 3-4 years' time, how that's going to revolutionize and the technologies, I think it's probably there. We're just not aware of it. And I think you just have to look to other countries like China and Japan that are so far forward in terms of robotics delivering some of those care bits and pieces that we're doing. I think delivering
Don't get
food
me
and
started
parcels,
on
but
China.
yeah, I think for me, in terms of, I have to remember I don't know everything about it. There will be differences of opinions along that way, but also you can only do as much as you can do with what you've got in terms of knowledge, experience, and I think for me, if there's somebody that asks me to talk about AI or robotics, actually passing them on to somebody that's got a lot
Yeah.
more experience and not taking all of that on, which I think could be very easily, because I'm very passionate about obviously where that kind of supports the sector and the role.
Do you think AI and robots will help protect your energy with regards to will it free up more time for you in your role?
I think as we roll them out, I think it's down to each individual or the company to determine what that looks like. I think we know that they help with productivity. And I think at that point, it's whether we
Mm,
then say, right, Mark, you've managed to free up 2 hours using AI. Are you then going to give me 2 hours additional work? Or are you going to say, utilize that 2 hours to go and do something for you or spend it with the team? Or so
100%.
I really do think it
That's how I
depends.
see
But
it.
I think there will be organizations that shave some time off, but they just give extra work. And I do think there'll be some organisations that do a really good job in terms of actually, if you shaved off 2 hours, finish 2 hours and have a really kind of flexible
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah, 100%. And I think more people are working from home now, or part office, part home. And so I think any boss that takes the old authoritarian approach to management is not going to last that long and not going to have many people working for them.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I now want to sort of talk more. I can't, but talk more about the future of care because that's kind of what it's led me into. But that's kind of where
That'll be a conversation
all
for
my
another
questions
day.
go. Indeed, yeah, absolutely. It's very
It
interesting
is.
actually. And I imagine with your work with a caring view, you've got some good ideas on that. Bit scary, but if we work with it, it can be exciting.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Mark, for the episode of Continuing the Conversation with Sadie, where we explore the heart of care through emotionally intelligent dialogue and sector shifting stories. Today's conversation with Mark Tops has reminded us all that leadership in social care isn't just about innovation or visibility. It's about integrity, reflection, and the quiet courage to protect our energy while holding space for others. We've explored how empathy can be a powerful connector, but also how boundaries, when set with clarity and care, can deepen that connection rather than dilute it. Mark's shift towards a calmer, more intentional life is a reminder that sustainability in care work begins with self awareness and ends with collective impact. So, as we close, I invite you to reflect: what boundary might you honour this week? What part of your practice needs softening and what needs strengthening? Whether you're leading a team, supporting a client, or simply navigating your own care journey, know that your emotional intelligence is a resource and your boundaries, they're a form of advocacy. Thank you, Mark, for your honesty, your leadership, and your continued work with a caring view. And thank you to everyone listening for continuing the conversation. Until next time, take care of yourself, each other, and keep reflecting, keep growing, and keep caring. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you very much for having me.